Good evening and welcome to Chicken Soup for the Soul for May 2020. Normally we would be gathering in Church House here in Northstowe once a month for this beautiful reflective service that is a bit of chicken soup for the soul in times of need. And I think in these strange days, then we need that bit of chicken soup even more than ever. The power of what we do is that we come together to remind ourselves that we're not alone, and yet our focus as we gather is on time out from the busyness and the craziness and the confusion of the world, time spent deeply with God. And we do this by drawing together modern things and ancient things, and it all comes together beautifully. Our practice is normally to have a quick cup of tea and just catch up with how each other are. Harder to do online, but I love the fact that so many of you are chatting on the WhatsApp group, so keep that going and we'll keep that function going. And then we make sure we're sitting comfortably and we watch the next in the series of the Rob Bell Numa videos. And we have a treat tonight. We are going to be watching Breathe, which is video number 14. Fortunately, they're already up on YouTube, so even though the DVD is here with me, I can point you in the right direction. But this is perhaps one of my favourite of these videos. It's the first Numa video that I watched, and it spoke really powerfully to me. And in these days where we are staying home or changing the way we live and work in order to fight a pandemic that attacks how we breathe, to spend 15 minutes thinking about the breath in scripture and God's breath within us seems appropriate, poignant, perhaps challenging, but certainly timely. And so we are going to take these 15 minutes of quiet reflection to think about God's breath and what it means to breathe deeply. Obviously, Rob Bell recorded this video years ago without any reference to the pandemic, but I wonder what new insights these times will bring and what refreshment this will bring to us. Much needed chicken soup for the soul. Our normal practice as we gather would then, after watching our reflective video, would be to spend 10 minutes in complete silence. And there's something powerful we have found about being with others and yet silent before our God. And as you do this at home, know that you are not alone, that there are others around the world who are similarly stopping and listening to God. As we come to those 10 minutes of silence, we'll put a video up into this playlist to help guide you through that 10 minutes of silence and give you a sense of the time passing. But I invite you to focus on your breathing. And as you breathe in, to breathe in God's love. And as you breathe out, to acknowledge perhaps how you are feeling. Don't be afraid of it. Don't try to hide, but to breathe it out to God, and then breathe in again his love. And as you start with that focus on your breathing and your sense of emotion, and then as you find yourself getting calmer, as often happens when we breathe deeply, then maybe stop deliberately processing in your head and start to simply listen to what God might have to say to you today. And we'll take that 10 minutes of listening and breathing. If we were here in the lounge at Church House, after those 10 minutes, we'd have a bit of a chat and see what God's brought to the front. Now, if this time of silence brings up something for you that you want to talk about, please give me a ring, get in touch. Don't sit there by yourself. Don't feel you're alone. I'm still here so we can talk about these things, and know that I am praying for all of you as we embark on this reflective, meditative time. But after we have watched the video and held silence, we then join with the ancient monastic tradition of completing the day in prayer. And if we were here in Church House, then we would in fact make sure that we leave in silence, just as the monks in years gone by and still today, they would have this final service, this compline, this completion service in the chapel. And then they would process out in silence, and the great silence would begin. So the last words of the day are spoken to God. And that's quite a beautiful thing. If you're able to say these words and then head to bed, it can be quite powerful. I'll give you a quick run through if you've not seen the service of Compline before to explain to you a little bit more about the structure. But if you're familiar with it, then feel free to stop the video now and jump straight on to the next video in our series, which is Rob Bell number 14, the Pneuma video called Breathe. And the URL is up there, bit.ly Chicken Soup May 2020, and that will take you through these 4 reflective videos. So here is a quick run through as to what's coming so that I don't need then to use any more words of introduction. So when it comes to our final video, we'll start, this slide will appear quietly, we'll hold a bit of silence, and then all the words that I say are in the paler type and your words are in bold. And even though you're at home by yourself, you may find it helpful to say them out loud and know that you're not alone, because there are many, many people around the world praying these same words as they end their day. We'll then take a bit of time to look back and examine the day before saying sorry to God and assuring ourselves that He does make haste to help us. Then there's this beautiful traditional bedtime poem that we will say together before turning to one of our psalms. And we've been praying a lot of psalms recently while we've been in lockdown. And the practice, if you think about those monks in the chapel, imagine them sitting either side and there being quite an echo in the room. And the way that people traditionally say psalms during Compline particularly is that at that little diamond, then we pause to stop the sentence running away and to allow the echo to die out. And then we continue with the rest of the sentence. And depending on your tradition, you might pause for greater or lesser times. I tend to pause similarly at the diamonds as between the verses. And then the other half of the choir would then read the next verse. So if I say the words that are in pale type, and then you all respond after a pause with the words in bold, I'll say both of them for the purposes of the tape. And after we have joined our prayers with the prayers of the ancient Hebrew people, we reflect on just a tiny snippet from Scripture. Compline is not the time for big unpackings. It's just a peek through the keyhole into the big story before we respond. And then we join in with Simeon's song that he sang after recognizing and meeting Jesus as a baby and realizing that he was the long promised Messiah. Finally, we have an opportunity for prayer where we are deliberately offering thanksgiving and praying for others. And I'll guide you through that before we share in the traditional Compline Collect, this wonderful prayer. And this is a lovely one to memorize. If you're ever having trouble sleeping, this is a great prayer to end your day with, without whether or not you're saying the whole of Compline, where we share in the Lord's Prayer and a final blessing before ending in silence. So now you know what's coming. I invite you to make yourself comfortable. Like me, you may like to light a candle and to settle down, to spend some time with others and with God as we breathe deeply of His love tonight. May God bless you through this time.